we will now call the meeting of the Citizens Redistricting Advisory Committee to order on October 28th, 2021 at 4:09 p.m. Joining me in person today are committee members Josh Caballero, Benjamin Gomez, Linda Lewis, Connie Nichols, Tony Herbert, Isabel Lozano, Elaine Boteo, Kim Kazanis, Pat Atkins, Curtis Cleveland, and Chrisarla Houston. So Benji is to be here, and I think Chris is coming a little bit later.
So I don't think Mr. Gomez or Ms. Houston are here right this second.
Correct. Okay. And we have no members that will be joining us virtually. Our city staff today that are with us are Jennifer Ritchie, our city attorney, and Esmeralda Hudson, our city secretary. And also here today is our consultant, Professor Michael Morrison. And thank you so much for all that you are doing to facilitate our group and emails and communication. We so appreciate the efforts of all three of you. It looks like we have no public guests or registered speakers tonight. So we can move on to our agenda, which we're going to begin with just an approval of the October 21st, 2021 summary notes that I think all of you should have received by email.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Thank you.
Is there discussion?
Okay.
I do have a couple.
Of course, sure. Any discussion?
This is mainly housekeeping, but under number 1, it calls us the Citizen Redistrict Advisory Committee.
Okay.
And I mean, just redistricting there.
Okay.
In several places here, the notes say that things were discussed when actually they were presented.
Okay.
And if we could change that, let's say there's one under number 1 and one. The following items were also discussed, and that was also under number 1. There are 4 places I see, 5 places I see. Where I would prefer that it not say that we discussed it.
Okay.
You know.
I think that's fine.
Under number 2, the last sentence, the committee discussed, and I guess I would say the committee were informed of the areas that are still under discussion. And to clarify that, I would say by council members. Just to indicate that the council has taken no action on this.
Okay.
Maybe also the second paragraph on the second page that starts off, additionally, Mike Morrison informed the committee. And it was about how you can get the voter list from the elections office. And I would like it noted that that's at a cost of $37.50. You know, that was specified.
Sure.
When we talked about it. And I think
Okay.
that needs to be noted. That's it.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Thank you, Tony. All right. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approval of the October 21st, 21 summary notes with the revisions as noted, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. All right, so we'll start with just a brief discussion of the redistricting process. I know many of you obviously were here last week and or have gone on and reviewed the video available, but I've asked Professor Morrison just to give us a brief update just to kind of start us off, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Jennifer. Her request was oral, but I still understood that brief was in all caps. How many of y'all have not either seen the video, looked at the slides? Is everybody? Okay, just very, very briefly. From a legal standpoint, we have to balance population with intolerances, and they're 10% off the ideal. The current plan is a little above 20%, which is after 10 years, not that bad, but is outside of constitutional tolerances. And doing that is the principal driving factor of a redistricting process. If you don't do that, nothing else matters. Then in addition to that, both through the 5th, 14th, 15th Amendments and the Voting Rights Act, we have to be careful that in the process of balancing population, we don't unnecessarily make it more difficult for minority voters to elect candidates of their choice. And that can be done two ways. One is retrogressive, where you come up with something that makes it harder than what you're replacing. And that would be a violation of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act if you could have avoided it and still balanced population. The other is dilution, which is Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and that is not drawing a plan as well as it could have been drawn without showing what factors were at play. And some of those factors are listed in the slides that you have, and that's things like maintaining existing boundaries, not moving polling places, incumbency, keeping together where you can constituencies that form a core of support or belief. So that's our goal. The way the process worked is once we had the census figures, which as everybody knows came about 8.5 months, or about 8 months late, it was a matter of looking at the current plan with those figures attached, which is where we came up with where we understood for the first time that we were about twice what the difference in the high and low districts should have been. To help the council start that process, I presented the council with a map that, at least in my opinion, met the legal requirements, but explained to the council, even at the time, that the map didn't even rise to the level of a suggestion. It was simply a way to get the process started. And as I explained to the council, I do that the same way for every client. And that is, I make the minimum number of changes to the existing lines that I can find that both balance population and have either a positive or as small a negative impact on voting strength in minority districts as possible. That's the plan that we started with. Since then, as I mentioned last time, there were several suggestions from within the council to change that first plan. One was an area from 5 that I had put into 3. Josh and Jim agreed that that could go back in 5 and you could still balance population. There were several other areas, both 5 and 3 added people, election precincts to 4, which needed some people and particularly needed to offload some people somewhere perhaps. And once that was done, then Josh and Kelly agreed to two variation changes that kept a neighborhood association together. The last thing that was in that first draft plan that there is no agreement on yet is what we've been looking at. And I've tried to give you something that's a little bit easier to read, where I've labeled one area that's under discussion, at least between 2 council members, as Alexander, because that's the main street running through it, and the other River, to distinguish them. The map I've printed, rather than print 2 maps and waste the ink, it's just a copy of where we started. And so the fact that Alexander is in 4 and River is in 1 doesn't reflect any agreement to that placement. And what follows are 2 spreadsheets, which show, at least in my opinion, there is no legal basis to pick one over another. The choice, if it boils down to that, is really a choice that involves factors other than balancing population or protecting minority voting strength. I think we're going to see that there's at least one other suggestion that's been distributed that I didn't see till this afternoon. I don't think anybody saw it till this afternoon, that proposes that instead of starting as I did, looking at the existing lines and making as little change as possible, this is a suggestion that the lines change significantly. And there's a justification that's offered by the author, and I don't know who the author is, that suggests that over a period into the future, those lines might serve the city better than these lines. Since I can't predict the future, I don't have an opinion on that. And I also don't have a lot of ego attached to any of the lines we've drawn so far. The point of the line, yes, ma'am.
are we privy to know who proposed this?
I tell you if I knew.
Oh.
That's what I was just saying. I don't know who did it.
Somebody knows, who knows?
I don't know who knows, Tony.
Esmeralda, you know? Oh, come on, it had to come in from an email.
I would suggest res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for
I do not
itself.
know
It either
why.
makes sense or it doesn't.
Oh, yeah, I get that part.
Right. Couldn't be political at all.
Mike, with respect to that proposal, I know you've done a lot of spreadsheets showing the breakdown and the number of folks in the various proposed districts and the demographics of those. Is there any information like that?
I got that about 2 hours ago, so no.
All you got was the map, correct?
And I got the map sort of third hand. I don't know where it started. And I really don't care. I mean, it's either a good idea or it's not a good idea.
Well, it's hard to know without, I mean, and somebody's clearly spent some time drawing the lines and but without the numbers to back it up and knowing what the population is, it's real hard to. do
I agree.
much with that.
And
And 2 weeks out from a vote, a little bit close, to make changes is major, I would think. It'd be nice if we had a little more time to consider that. My personal opinion. Sorry,
Tony,
Mike. I know you're
I'm
just
not
the
in
hired
charge of that.
consultant.
Too, it's nice just to at least have other options,
Sure.
as we're looking at, the conversations and kind of, research that's been done over the last week. So much of it has been centered around, okay, these things were agreed upon by council members and these are still kind of under deliberation and under consideration. So we've kind of focused maybe more of our efforts in that respect. So I think it's healthy to know that there are other things to look at in a different perspective. And even, yes, I agree it is close, but, as far as going through the process, I think that's a healthy one to have other alternatives.
I agree.
Again, I've told you everything I know about that plan. And it would be a half-day process to tell you more. And I would prefer to wait until I find out whether there's an interest in that, because obviously one thing I'm concerned at is half of Waco sending a map in that I spend a half a day each on.
Sure.
So
And that makes sense.
is that a sufficient summary?
I think so. Are there any other specific questions that anyone wanted to pose to Professor Morrison now? I mean, obviously he will be here for the meeting, and as we go through discussions, we can utilize his expertise, but
It's as brief as I can make it.
no, thank you very much.
I'd
Yes, ma'am.
just like to know our timeline. We have one more meeting on the 11th, and then what happens after that?
Right. And so we are charged with determining the plan that we want to propose to council. So at that point, we would want to complete that process and be able to provide that suggestion.
So what I'm hearing is that on our November the 11th meeting, this redistricting committee will vote on the plan we're going to send
To
to
be
the
presented.
towns.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Could you repeat what Linda said?
She just said, sure. She just said, so on our November 11th meeting, we will be voting on the plan to be presented to the council.
Is that,
Yes, I was just repeating what you said.
okay, yes.
So that presumes that we'll have another meeting.
Yes, I would think so.
Okay.
So obviously, we've been provided a significant amount of information in the previous week, and then that has been accumulated in the last few days, kind of providing further clarification on what we're calling the river area and the Alexander area. So, really at this point, upon having just an initial discussion, now it's really just a discussion amongst the committee members of the redistricting model plan. Are we as a group in agreement with, I mean, we can go at it several different ways. I think, are we in agreement with those items that have been agreed to with the council, and we're good there, and we want to move forward with discussions on Alexander and River and District 4 and District 1, where we want to go from that? Are we thinking a different picture altogether and want to consider and give some suggestions and thought to this new information that's come to us this afternoon? I mean, I think I do not know who this came from either. It's come from District 5 to one of our committee members, and they shared that with me. And so I just, felt like it was important to share all input that we received over the last week. So that was kind of my decision to send that out to everyone.
I think what would be helpful before we make any decisions on how to move forward, is to have the information on exactly what the numbers look like for this new proposal and what those percentages would look like with respect to, is it going to fall within the acceptable legal ranges? And I know Mike just received this, so he hasn't had an opportunity, but it would be nice to see exactly what these numbers look like, making the shift for this map.
Mhm. So Jennifer, I guess, if that were the process that we wanted to go down, would we, would that suggestion have to be made to council first? And then, no, we can just go directly to kind of have that. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that.
In this, that's sort of the same vein of something a lot different. I'm wondering about the possibility of, since we're looking at redistributing just population, I mean, we're roughly trying to keep ethnicity and racial voters balanced or population balanced, but mainly it is a redistribution for population purposes. And I'm wondering if there's a way to look at it, and this would be, I guess, a question for Mike, but it also seems very logical to have District 1 increased in population by taking some District 5, which it's also adjacent to, like Steinbeck Bend or whatever. But I would be interested in seeing how those figures look, because it's certainly logical.
I would agree. And I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, Professor Morrison, but I kind of will. So when you were kind of going through your process, as far as your initial suggestion to council, were there, obviously I consider you to be the expert in the field on this, and were there things specifically that you considered in thinking, okay, this is a better manner in which to reach our goals statistically versus, a change from 5 to 1?
The choice of the factors to be considered that go beyond the legal are entirely up to the council. And at least at this point, I haven't had instructions from the council to rethink things like, should you take people in District 5 who've elected Jim Holmes and put them somewhere else because you think that's a better place for them when there's no legal justification?
Sure.
As far as trying to predict population growth, I've done that a few times and we've never gotten it right. And growing as fast as Waco grows, it doesn't matter where we shift the people in 10 years, we'll redo it. So it's not a reason to shift them and it's not a reason not to shift them. I think one thing, and I agree with your city attorney that I'm here to help staff this group. You have limited time. We all wish we had more time. We all wish we'd gotten the census in February instead of the end of August. It might be worth talking to your council members, and I don't want to step beyond my bounds, to see if they have any interest in you and I spending time on things like this.
Okay.
I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy to do it at this committee's request. But considering the committee's time, I don't know whether we would be chasing a rabbit down a hole or if we would be pursuing something the council might be really interested in seeing.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point.
In view of the letter from the Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association,
Can you speak into your microphone, Mrs. Lewis?
in view of the letter from the Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association, it would be really helpful to me if on these maps, we could have the numbers of the voting precincts. The River District and the Alexander District doesn't say enough for me. And if I had the voting precincts, then we could go back and look at some other data. That's, yeah, if
And
they,
I think that was, let's see, let me make sure. Well, I know the neighborhood associations map was provided in a link, which is kind of corresponds with our with the districts. And I'm drawing a blank here. Was there a map with the?
Jennifer, I can send you one for you to distribute to the committee by
Okay.
tomorrow morning.
Okay.
I can send a map that has all the city and all the county election precincts. It's two separate maps, so you can see and be able to read them, but be happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
No, nothing.
And just to clarify also, there were, just to kind of follow along with some requests that were made at the last meeting as well. I'll ask Jennifer if she will just kind of present, there were some questions with respect to the neighborhood association, since she brought that up, Ms. Lewis, as far as, had there been discussions, were there suggestions? Obviously, we have this information from Brook Oaks, but there also was some outreach to the other neighborhood associations, just to see if there was feedback there as well.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So Millette Harrison and Rolando Rodriguez, who work with our neighborhood associations, at y'all's request, reached out to, well, first of all, they attend most, or if not all, the neighborhood associations. And they said none of the neighborhood associations at the time they asked had in-depth discussions about redistricting. Some had sort of mentioned it. They did reach out to the 4 that had mentioned it to see if they had minutes that reflected that. So they reached out to Kendrick, Brook Oaks, Downtown, and Northeast Riverside, and none of those, with the exception, I'll get back to Brook Oaks, none of those, 3 of the 4 had not had discussions, were wanting to have future discussions, and would certainly forward the minutes when they had those discussions. Brook Oaks, I believe Ms. Herbert went to the maybe the October 25th meeting. And so y'all have in front of y'all, it was sent out today, a resolution or something they came to an agreement on. And so y'all have that. And so, but that meeting was on the 25th.
They didn't act on that. They acted on that at a board meeting before that general meeting on the 25th. So that resolution came from the 20th. And it's a weird format, and I'm sorry, but that's how I got it. But I seriously doubt that Brook Oaks and probably most of the other neighborhood associations have minutes. I mean, there might be, I think Millette probably takes notes, but she takes them from a city staff support perspective. so.
Right. And that's a very good point. Thank you, Ms. Herbert. No, she said most of the neighborhood associations don't keep minutes, but they were willing to forward whatever they have when they have a discussion. So thank you for that clarification.
If I might answer Linda's question, the 2 election precincts referred to by the Brook Oaks communication, the river is part of election precinct 10. It's the amount involved is probably less than half the population of 10, but about half the geographic area of 10. And the Alexander mentioned one is in election precinct 39. And it is almost all of election precinct 39, except for the portion between Lyle and Proctor, and at one end, and 27th Street and 16th Street at the other. So, no, I'm sorry, at 26th Street and 8th Street. So 39 is the one named Alexander on the map, and 10 is the one named River on the map. But I will also get to you 2 maps that show all the election precincts in the county and the city.
Another thing, thank you, Linda. I was going to wait until we got to the what do we need, what are you requesting section, but I'm glad you said that. The things that I thought would be really useful to us were a precinct map that have actual streets on them, street names on them. And it would be nice to have an overlay of the neighborhood associations. And I need it in hard copy because I have a black and white printer, and links are virtually useless to me to print things out. But if we could get 1 or more maps that show those 3 things, precincts, street names, and neighborhood associations, I think it would be really useful to all of us.
That would probably come from the city IT people.
As far as having the streets.
Well, the streets are on what
The
I
streets
sent
are on
out,
what
but
you
it's, but by the time you blow it up beyond that size, the streets either run into each other or they disappear based on my software. But the city's GIS software can do
Yeah, they
that.
can do us an 11 by 17 at least.
Yeah.
And just to kind of further clarify on the Brook Oaks statement of position that was provided, that has also kind of been done in a position of a petition, or not a petition per se, but there is definitely citizen support that is written. This is one page, and I think Tony's expecting another page. So I just want to let you know that had not been forwarded to the committee, but I wanted to let you know that that did exist.
There was actually a little blurb at the top of that. I just sent you I just gave you the attachment.
Sure.
I made a copy of the petition-like page. But what was sent around had, you have all the whereases on the resolution, but then at the bottom, there's the be it therefore resolved, and it really states the position. And so that was at the top of that page right there.
Okay.
And it just said in support of the Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association resolution. And
Okay.
it stated that last part. And I thought I sent you that, but if I didn't, I'll send you that.
You did. No, you did. And that was the second page of what was sent to the committee. So the first page kind of had all of the statements, and then the last page had the statement that preceded the list of signatures. Correct? Am I?
Right,
Okay.
right. And this is the page that was given back to me. I have the original of this page.
Okay.
Some of the Brook Oaks members took other pages. And so I anticipate getting more of these. So I don't know if you want to see all of these at the same time, or if you want me to just, give them to Jennifer as I get them, but whatever you want.
Go ahead and just forward it to me, and then I'll send it out to the group.
Okay.
That would be great. But I just wanted you to know that that was there, and that it wasn't, a standalone statement of position without community support.
Is the take-home point that the members of the neighborhood association who weighed in are in alignment with their board of directors? Is that the take-home point from all the documents?
So I can't say, I don't know all of the people on this particular list, so I can't say for sure that these are all members of that particular neighborhood association.
Oh, and I didn't tell them they needed to be limited to the members of the neighborhood association. It was
So
just
they
people
signed
in
on to the statement
area
of
or elsewhere
Sure.
That's what I-
in District 4 that could have been in support. And some of those things, I was looking at those, and some of these people don't know how to do a petition,
Sure.
And so you'll see that a lot of handwriting is the same on different names. So somebody signed for themselves and their husband and their mother or whatever, I don't know.
Sure.
But it does ask for an address or a telephone number, so that, I assume, so that those could be checked.
Mhm.
If we really want to put a fine point on it, and I didn't think we did. It was just kind of an unofficial thing that they did, and to follow up on their resolution.
Sure.
So do you did you get a different idea?
I guess, just so that I clearly understand. Sure. Is that document from the same body? That's all I'm asking.
Yes.
Would
Yes,
it
from the
be-
neighborhood association.
So it is,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. And
Excuse me?
Yes.
Just a point of clarification, if I'm right, and I'm looking at the area that we're calling Alexander,
Yes.
we've been discussing River.
Yes.
And the corresponding neighborhood association is Brook Oaks.
Yes.
For Alexander, is it North Waco Neighborhood Association?
I believe so.
I believe so.
Yes. And so we
And-
do not have communication from them.
And is there anybody in the city, like does Merlot or Rolando, do they know if that neighborhood association is active? Or if they have any way of communicating with them to get their input about this process and what's going on?
I missed the very first, I was talking to Esmeralda, I apologize. I missed the first part of your question, I apologize.
The question would be if Merlot and Rolando are aware of whether or not the North Waco Neighborhood Association is meeting and functioning, and if this topic has been brought to them for consideration.
I will certainly ask them that question. I might be able to even get the answer back before the end of y'all's meeting. I'll
Okay.
find out. I know for sure that to the extent neighborhood associations are active, they are going to the meetings, and they said that the only four that might have talked about it was the four I mentioned, but I will check and see if they're active.
I mean, to me, it's like comparing apples to apples. If we're comparing these two plans, these two areas, and we're hearing a lot from Brook Oaks and getting a lot of, input from them, it would be nice to hear from the community that we're calling Alexander.
I agree. Well, and I actually did look at the list of neighborhood associations today. I don't know if I can get there quickly. Jennifer, you may be able to. And I know each of the neighborhood associations was included on the page with the leadership person specific, who is sorry, it is not stuck in my head who the leadership or who the leader of that particular neighborhood association is. I'll look it up right now. Chris, are you, sorry.
Is there a way to get the password so that we can get online and look at those things? Did follow those links?
Yes, so the password is all lowercase, and Esmeralda, please correct me if I'm wrong. Waco CC 17. And then the network, is it the C Council, Esmeralda?
It's CC Public.
Excuse me, CC Public. So CC Public is the network, and the password is Waco CC 17. So Chris, are you clear? I just want to make sure I answered your question
Yes.
appropriately.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So I did want to make a clarification there, I think, to Chris's question. So I would say, Chris, that the original petition from Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association is signed by their board, and that represents the neighborhood association. The additional signatures that have been submitted go beyond the membership of the neighborhood association. So just as a point of clarification. So it does include some folks. It includes people, I believe, from what I've seen, who live in that area that is being discussed within Precinct 10. But it's not necessarily synonymous with the neighborhood association.
So just, yeah, so
Yes.
Exactly.
if they're signing, they're agreeing with the statement of position, but they're not necessarily members of that particular district or neighborhood association.
That neighborhood association would kill for that many members,
Okay.
as would any neighborhood association in town right now.
Got it. Thank you for that, Josh.
I'm still waiting to hear back from city staff about whether they're active, but on the website, the North Waco Neighborhood Association doesn't have a contact person designated.
A good point, though. I agree. I think we definitely need to reach out.
Mike, if there's no agreement reached between the Alexander and River swaps, does that send you back to the drawing board?
No, I mean, right now, it is up to the council to decide, does it want me to hunt for something else? But each council member involved wants at least one of those districts. I learned today that it's possible that one council member may want them both. And, but I would say, Curtis, that without some more direction, I wouldn't really know where to go other than throw a dart at the board. And so I may simply come down to a council vote. That's typically how these things end up being resolved if they can't do it among the council.
Well, that's the whole purpose of this group, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just to try to hash out some of these issues and then make a report that sounds reasonable. I may just be cynical now, and I'm sure you can't believe that, Curtis, but given the late date of the creation of this group, I mean, Fort Worth has been doing this kind of thing since June. They didn't have their numbers yet, but they had their process. But given the fact that we only had a chance to do 3 meetings, I'm thinking that when some controversy came up, the council needed, a buffer. I mean, that's what groups like this are for. I mean, and also probably some ideas that they might not have considered previously. So, that's our use.
Yeah.
Well, I guess today is the time to ask the District 4 folks if the China Springs option is even something worth discussing.
Frankly, I think it's too late to try to throw things like that out there at the neighborhoods. This is a difficult process for them to wrap their heads around in the easiest terms. I think that's something the council might want to start talking about for 10 years from now, I don't know if they can you redistrict other than when there's a census?
Yes, in fact, there have been times, including McLennan County, where we've 2 or 3 years later come back and address something. It's difficult to get everybody excited about it because they remember what it was like the last time.
Yeah.
But the only requirement is if you find yourself out of constitutional tolerance, you have to redistrict. But since we'll use the 2020 numbers until we get 2030 numbers, any redistricting that takes place would use these numbers.
Sure.
But you wouldn't have to redistrict because even if you grew as this suggests, we wouldn't know what the numbers were to put on the ground. And so let's say in 6 years, you look at it and say, my golly, that's really grown. We still use the same census unless we can come up with citywide numbers that we can prove are more accurate. And you can't cherry pick. You can't say, well, there used to be no one here. And now look at, there's an apartment complex. You've got to be able to prove your numbers are more accurate across the board if you get a legal challenge. If you don't get a legal challenge, you can do almost anything until you do.
The question for District 4, and we're probably not going to resolve this the next 10 days, is District 4.
Talk into your microphone. I'm sorry, I don't hear well.
Is District 4 interested in new rooftops in the future?
Say it again.
Is
Sorry.
District 4 interested in new rooftops in the future?
I think District 4 has been concentrating on infill development for so long right now that it would be hard for them to start thinking in terms of, further out, concentric circle kind of development. But I'm not saying that they wouldn't, at some point in the future, but right now, I think it would, this kind of timeline, I don't think, you'd have to go to more than just Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association.
Well, you'd also have to go to District 5,
Sure.
District 1.
Yeah, who's
District 3,
losing?
'cause all the people that you're pulling out got to go somewhere.
And those are major. I'm assuming that one consideration, and I think maybe to me, it would be the major consideration when you start to do a redistricting is doing as little as having as little disruption as possible to the existing districts. Because it's hard enough to get people to vote. And once you've, developed relationship and whatever, it's very confusing to people when changes are made like that. And I think that might be one of the things that Brook Oaks is most concerned about is that this is major. This is not a simple change to them. This is huge. And they've got some area where there aren't a lot of residents and maybe even no residents, but they're very proud of that area all along the riverfront. They got the zoo, they got the waterworks, they got Con Bottoms, they got the Riverwalk, they got, some new housing. They got a lot of stuff over there that they felt like they, as a cohesive group, put a lot of time and effort into.
Mike,
And I can say that too.
could you talk a bit about Brook Oaks neighborhood, the statement of packing for the council to discuss the packing statement that the move would be packing and putting most of the African-American voters in one district. Could you discuss that a little bit with us?
Well, the change is within a couple of percentage points, Connie. And at least in the Brook Oaks area, most of the change that takes place actually goes down instead of up. Of the two plans in front of you, the one that keeps River in 4 and puts Alexander in 1 lowers 1's minority profile about 1.5% and raises 4's minority profile about 0.5%. It moves more residents who signed as of Hispanic origin than of African American. About probably 65% of those, no, that wouldn't be right. About 55% of those moved would have been of Hispanic origin and about the remaining 45 of African American. So if you look at that, there's about a 2% swing in that, but they're both in the low 70s. And when you look at the voting age population, and then you consider a turnout of about 7% when you're not in a mayoral election would be a high turnout, numbers sort of lose their meaning. And what becomes important is the history of whether or not a district has been able to elect a candidate of color. And 1 and 2 have succeeded in that. 4 actually has the highest minority profile of any district in the city, but has not yet elected a candidate of color. And so I'm reluctant to start messing with a formula that has been successful for 50 years, 40 years, on the notion I might do something better. Same reason I'm a little reluctant to use this. And incidentally, if we're going to pursue this, maybe you can read where those lines are. I cannot. And I've been looking at these maps a long time. I would need a better map.
Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to make sure that we had something in the minutes that discussed that particular point so that the council was clear what the numbers and the swings were.
Okay.
In discussions with the people in Brook Oaks, they didn't have access, to all of those census figures and everything. This was kind of gut level stuff. So again, it was a kind of a informal process because they were, under the gun. They didn't have time to research how to do this or anything. So they did what they thought they could do.
But as I said earlier, I don't think a successful legal challenge could be mounted against either of those two choices.
That's what I was, and I think that's what Ms. Nichols is trying to
Yeah.
ascertain.
Yeah.
Because when I read it, I just didn't see how they got there. I don't know a lot of con law, but that doesn't square with what I do know.
No, I,
Just by virtue of them not having the statistics in front of them, there may have been that.
It was perception.
Perception.
yeah, but I mean, either choice, I think is fully defensible.
Mhm.
But as you say, there may be other choices too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. I was looking at, and I think, Tony, you're exactly right. When I went back and looked at Mike's presentation from last week, one of the criteria that's traditionally used is maintaining the core of existing districts. And that's one of the things we need to be sensitive
The
to.
core what?
The core of existing
Oh,
districts.
yeah.
And also the use of existing election precincts and then maintaining these communities of interest. And when you're looking at just these, and I agree there are any number of options, and my brain is more linear, and I've got 2 options in front of me, so I'm just trying to compare those 2, and if we want to look at others, we definitely can. But when I look at those 2, leaving, and Mike's exactly right, the difference in the maximum deviation is less than 1/4 of a percentage point, but leaving Alexander in District 1 and keeping Brook Oaks together is 1/4 of a percentage point better, I guess, at less deviation. It seems like if you're trying to maintain communities of interest, and if we assume the neighborhood associations are based on folks with similar neighborhoods, then that allow, if you leave Brook Oaks together, you maintain that community of interest in the same district. North Waco is an interesting district because if you shift Alexander into District 1, you get most of it into District 1, and then there's this one little square that goes down towards Maple that would still be left in District 4.
And why? I mean, why was that? Why couldn't we just put the whole precinct? Why wasn't that the proposal?
It was what I was told to draw. Remember, I'm responding to council members at this point.
You're such a cop-out.
And if you
Okay,
look,
so you were responding to, who suggested those lines?
I was
The council
responsible.
members is what?
I was responsible for the initial placing 10, that portion of 10 in District 1. The notion about that portion of 39, which as Pat says is almost all of 39, was Kelly's.
Okay, did she met with you, right, Jennifer? Did she say, because she hasn't said to us that there's any particular reason for leaving a piece out, or even that she knows the little piece was left out? I don't know.
I can't answer.
That particular issue did not come
Didn't
up.
come up. So I'll find out from her. I'll take
We
that.
have enough leeway, if that were the way that it goes, to add that and keep that election
Sure.
precinct together.
Well,
That
I
little
know,
square from Lyle to Maple, then you would have that entire neighborhood association and that entire precinct all go
Yeah.
to District 1. I don't know what that does to your numbers,
I-
but
I don't
if-
think it'll make much difference to the
if you
numbers.
compare
Pat.
what you have right now against the criteria that you presented last week. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of difference, but it does look like keeping precinct 1 satisfies the criteria of using existing election precincts. It does look like keeping Brook Oaks together maintains a community of interest. And I don't know all the backstory, but it just looks like incrementally, and then it's a 1/4 percentage point less difference that may be between those two options, slightly more beneficial. But that's just trying to compare the numbers against the criteria you presented us last week.
So Mike, is there still that little portion of precinct 10 that goes Herring up to 17th or 15th?
Linda, and if we leave quote River District 10 in precinct 4 or District 4, all of 10 would be in District 4.
I've talked to some people who live in that area over by the Methodist home, and they don't want to be in 4. They called me. They want to be in 1.
I just can't understand.
And they don't participate in the neighborhood association, but when they found out I was on this site, I
Could you repeat it?
got a couple of phone calls.
Miss Linda,
Yes.
I think she said, please articulate clearer.
Well, or Jennifer can repeat it or whatever. I just can't understand what you're saying, Linda.
Okay, what I'm saying, what the question was, there was a little portion of voting precinct 10 along Herring Avenue that goes up by the Methodist home. And the original proposal was to put that little portion into City Council District 1. And when some of the people that know me found out I was on this committee, they called and said they don't want to be in City Council District 4. They are unhappy with being there, and they want to be in City Council District 1. They don't feel like they get the attention, and that with all of the grants that have been coming over there, the crime is still unmanageable. This elderly Black couple, elderly Hispanic couple.
That's the first I've heard of it.
So the question was, if we go with the plan on the table, the entire portion of voting precinct 10 would be in 4. Is that, Professor Morrison, is that what we're saying?
Well, that's what the map shows, Linda, but actually there's not a plan on the table that puts either one of them in either place. Initially, there was an example given to the city council that did that, but based upon the council members who are involved disagreement, some of the maps I first showed you, both of those are just blank. I had to fill them in to get the numbers right for everybody. But I think if you consider those two areas as blank, it would be more accurate with where we are right now.
Okay. That's a disadvantage of being a Waco native. People call me because.
All right, so at this point, I think we are asking for the additional map with the precincts noted along with streets, and then also to reach out to the North Waco Neighborhood Association for additional comment, hopefully from that group.
Yes, and I just want to be clear. Do y'all want, I have notes that y'all want the number of voting, the voting precinct numbers on the maps, the precinct maps with street names, and neighborhood associations on there, and we can lay those on there. Do you want it citywide, or you just want it on in this area that's kind of in discussion? Because obviously citywide will be an enormous map.
I mean, my understanding was this particular piece. I mean,
I just wanted to make sure, because I didn't want to do it and then y'all tell me,
Sure.
you know.
I think we're fine with this piece. Is there any other? Okay.
I would say with the time restriction we have, just that area.
Okay.
Well, you have a map right now with the streets on that area. What it doesn't show is, and the election precincts, what it doesn't show is the neighborhood associations. If the city will send me the maps to the neighborhood associations, I can add those to this map and get it back to Jennifer tomorrow.
Sold.
Those neighborhood association map with the districts is on the city website. When we
No,
received the
no,
link.
These, you got this. Everybody
Yes,
got
ma'am.
one of these.
And that has precinct numbers on it?
It doesn't have the numbers. It has, I will put precinct, I'm going to send you a map of precinct numbers.
Okay. All right.
It'll be separate from this because I've already got one prepared. But what I can do is add where the neighborhood association lines are when the city sends them to me.
Yeah.
Okay, if you do it with color
We'll get you.
and
a
you
hard
send
copy.
me a link, I won't be able to print it. It's gonna be black and white. So
Is there anybody else besides Ms. Herbert that would prefer us to deliver a hard copy versus an electronic copy? Okay, we'll make sure you get a hard copy and
Okay,
everybody else will
thank
get an electronic copy too.
I mean, electronic is nice, you know,
Sure.
to
Oh,
look
yeah,
at,
we'll get you
but
both.
but I
won't-
can't
won't-
print it
I
in
won't
color.
withhold the
So,
electronic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure my homework now is one, maps with election precincts identifiable, and I will do that county and citywide. So you can use them for other things. And then once I have the neighborhood association lines within the boundary of this map, I will draw in and identify the neighborhood associations that are in here. Some, I mean, most of them will probably go outside that map, but I can do that.
And then I think just, Tony, you and I Tony prepared this information or actually obtained this information from the city. And just, I think will work hand in hand with what Professor Morrison is going to provide is the results of the joint general election. Now, this was obviously presidential election. So, definitely a higher turnout than our typical statistics that we've been talking about. But I think it would be appropriate to have this information as well if you're trying to delve further into the election precincts and what the results were there.
Right. That's 57 pages, but it's the whole, 4 different council positions were up for election in November. The exceptions were District 5 and District 2.
Well, I'll make another suggestion. As Tony knows, when the mayor 3 and 5 run, when the mayor 1 and 3 run, you have about 3 times the turnout
Absolutely.
as when 2 and 4 run. And when you look at that November election, I'm not sure how you're going to interpret that. I think it would be more useful if the city would provide did vote numbers where you had the mayor running and where you had the mayor not running in non-November partisan elections.
But you're
Tony.
going to have to go back. I think we can at least take into consideration that those are going to be larger numbers, but those could be aspirational, the city elections are usually minimal. There's minimal turnout in all the districts.
When you look at a did vote list for the city and school board elections,
But I don't think we need the names.
you don't need, you just need the numbers. But the point is the same people vote again and again and again. And when you get a partisan primary or a partisan runoff or a partisan general, you get a completely different group of people added to it, which skews what you see. So you're right. You don't need the names. When I said did vote list, I was just talking about the numbers broken down for the
Okay.
election.
That was very useful to me. Kelly gave me that and Josh has it too. It was useful to me in looking just at proportions of the voting for the 2 mayoral candidates and the 3 candidates from District 4. But also what was almost as interesting was the number of people who didn't vote. 400 ballots cast, 98 didn't vote in this election. So it told me, who either wasn't interested enough or didn't know the candidates or looked at the list of candidates and said, I don't want any of these. Anyway, it sort of showed.
You can hear me from way over here, but I do have the results from the last back to 2017 for both of those blocks, Alexander and River, of the number of voters. And like Tony said, they're very small, but you can see the differences when it's a mayoral election or a District 4 election in that group. So you want me to provide that for you for just
Sure.
those blocks.
For comparison, yeah. Well, and Jennifer can separate them out. I mean, we're only really looking at District 1 and District 4 right now. And so you don't need 57 pages to do that.
I think everybody, I think we're all understanding of the difference and the challenge as far as disseminating the information and making it useful when we're looking at specifically this issue. So I think that would be great, Esmeralda, if you would provide that as well.
So I have a question, Madam City Attorney. I'm so new in town. Ms. Ritchie, sorry. We are asking to see specific information on the neighborhood associations, right? Because we've heard from Brook Oaks very definitively. But I also heard you say that in the Alexander district, as outlined on our chart here, that the neighborhood associations are not active as they are in the River District.
Well, I'm still waiting from staff to hear if they're active, but what I did say was that there's not a contact person on the city's website, which may indicate something, but I'm waiting to hear back, and I will certainly let the committee know from city staff whether that's an active neighborhood association.
Just a question about that would be for me is in the absence of a neighborhood association for Alexander, who would we go to get the voice of that community of interest?
I will ask that question as well and relay that.
I would venture the guess that there is no community of interest in that particular area. It's not like there have been a lot of issues that the neighborhood has worked on, or, it's really in that area, it's really more a shift of strictly population. The North Waco, they called it the North Waco Community Association. And it was big, it was a great big area, because when the neighborhood associations were formed, we were trying to keep approximately the same number in each area too, so that it wouldn't, each one would carry sort of the same amount of weight. And that one is large in area, but a lot of the population is down, close to District 4 or in District 4. So I doubt that they would consider themselves a community of interest, but, maybe, doubt it.
I just would lean toward wanting to hear from them and not having somebody speak for them or decide for them.
That's where I was going.
I agree. Just because Brook Hollow maybe is on the front end and is talking the loudest doesn't mean that's the only opinion. So.
And the follow-up question, Ms. Ritchie, that I have is, would you be able to give this council any guidance as to how we might be able to ascertain the will of the people in the Alexander sector of this map if we find that they don't have an active neighborhood association? Can you tell us what would be Plan B to try to get an idea of what they might want? Would it be the city council member in that area, or would we need to dig deeper?
I think you certainly should talk to the council members in that area and surrounding that area. And probably have, if there's not an active neighborhood association, that'd be the best place to go.
Thank you.
If we had had more time, I would have gone to every neighborhood represented in Council District 4. Because it's kind of a cohesive, you can see on the map that it's the smallest district, it's most compact. The neighborhoods have been working together for 25 to 30 years. So it's not just something that affects Brook Oaks if part of Brook Oaks is taken out of District 4. I would like to have heard from Sanger Heights and Brookview and downtown and, Dean Highland. And North Waco, but it is really difficult if they're not active right now.
Sure.
For those who don't know, Tony was sort of the midwife on creating our neighborhood associations.
No, honey, I was the mother. I didn't just help give birth. The pain was mine.
It does occur to me, and I don't know, Professor Morrison, if you would agree, but as I look at the map and I look at District 4, it is in the center. It is the center of all districts. So it seems like we're focusing on 4. However, all zones are adjacent to it. So doesn't that make it, I mean, in terms of shifting population, doesn't it seem like it would be most likely to be affected just because of geography?
Well, it has, District 4 has a common boundary with 1, 5, 3.
And 2.
A little, yeah, downtown. But here, the disagreement affects a single common boundary. And so whatever swap takes place there would leave the other 3 districts unaffected. And so far as I can tell, and I know Tony's going to visit some with Alice, but so far as I can tell, it's only these 2 districts and this area where we don't have a consensus.
All right. Other requests or points of discussion for today?
May I?
Yeah,
ask
of course, yes.
May I ask if, as a committee, you feel like you're getting from me what you need?
Everyone hear the question?
Yes.
So do you feel as a committee that you're getting everything that you need to be able to make the decisions, whether that be from Professor Morrison is asking specific to him, but I think just in general.
There's something that I would be interested in, but I don't know if it's Mike's job or if there's anybody who would really think that this was, part of their role, but an explanation, something that, that would clarify for us and for the council what would be gained and what would be lost, not just in terms of the number of residents and voters, but in terms of assets, community development opportunities, economic engines, that kind of thing. I don't know if anybody's looking at that, but I think that might be what Brook Oaks is really trying to get at.
I don't, Tony, you're gonna be much better suited to that than I am. I would think that would be more important if we were about to de-annex one of these areas. I mean, they're still both going to be part of the city, no matter which way this goes. And at least when I was on the council, we looked at the whole city when we were considering things. But I know I would be ill-equipped to answer the question just because I had District 3 and then I had the city. I really don't have the knowledge that you have in this area or that, that you have. I think you've probably got a better store of knowledge about that than anybody, but maybe the current incumbent.
What I've got is confined to my head, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to try to make that explanation.
Yeah.
I will not claim to be unbiased in this situation.
Yeah, I think that the council is going to have to address that. I think y'all are certainly equipped as residents of Waco to consider those issues, but everybody in here is as well equipped as I am to answer that question.
Well, then why are we paying you the big bucks, dude?
Because I do this.
Do a map.
Yeah.
Madam
Yes,
Madam
ma'am.
Chair, as we have gotten some clear feedback from the Brook Hollow is in Houston, Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association. For some of us, and I mean all of us, who may not be able to get feedback from the council, from Councilwoman Palmer and Councilwoman Fairfield, would it be acceptable to perhaps request that they submit statements to us so that we can clearly understand their position and the position of those whom they represent in their districts? Because I think it would streamline our process for us. And it would also perhaps streamline the process for them. Because if each of us contacts them separately, and they have to explain the concerns, the justifications for the maps that they support, it seems like a more time-consuming endeavor for everyone involved. What are your thoughts? Or maybe can I see what everyone thinks?
Yeah, I mean,
I would agree with that recommendation as well, because any of us can talk to them, but if we could get something in writing, there's no misinterpretation, no miscommunication. So I would definitely agree with Mrs. Houston.
Or we could get them to come to the next meeting and they could do the swimsuit competition too, and then we could do the towel. I think something in writing would be great. That would be wonderful.
Everybody else is in agreement. Again, it's a matter of making sure we stay legal, making sure that we're maintaining, the core of the existing districts. I understand that, both councilwomen have considered these options. They probably are still thinking about the benefits of each for either one. But we're up against a timeline. And if they could provide a statement to help us kind of make the decision that's right, best for the community as well. We already know what, Brooke Oaks.
That could, Connie, not Connie, Elaine, sorry. That could also be the basis, because my next question was going to be, so how do we get to a plan?
right.
That could be a great basis just for consideration, for getting to a recommendation. I guess it's a
Sure.
recommendation more than a plan.
Correct.
And
I am happy to reach out to them on behalf of the committee. If that's appropriate, Jennifer, if that's appropriate from a procedural standpoint, I'm happy to reach out to them.
And just a point of clarification, it would be helpful for me if those two council members could not only speak to what they wish to have us do, but give us a summary of any input from their constituents that they have received, because I can imagine that that may not be the same thing.
Sure.
Like
Yeah,
we're
just
hearing
different-
from district, whatever it is,
District 4
Riverside here,
versus-
and then we heard from Miss Lewis,
Sure.
River.
they're calling
Oaks.
it river. It's the river area because it's right there by the river, but that is not a name of anything. And it is not
called
in
Brook
District
Oaks.
1, which is in pink. It's what we got from Esmeralda said, it's in pink, but that doesn't mean anything.
Got it. Sure. I understand. I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
You're a genius. No, you are. I'm sure.
Thank you. I think I might just be saying what some of my colleagues are thinking.
Yeah, well, and it is difficult. It's like, okay, so we're at this point, we've been armed with the information, we've requested a few other things, but really, is that additional information we get going to be enough to allow us to make that decision next week, frankly? So hopefully having this additional information from the council will be helpful.
At the request of restating the obvious, it just occurred to me, I probably should. That river area is currently in District 4. Even though the map that I gave the council to start this shows it in 1. Remember, that was just a way to get a discussion started.
Both of those are in.
Both are starting in 4.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Yeah, which was, honestly, was confusing to me at first. I was like, are we swapping those two pieces? Because I thought Alexander, I didn't realize was in 4 as well. So,
That's the only one that looks like it isn't.
Yeah.
In that map,
It looks like what?
that it isn't.
Oh. The first thing when I saw both of those, the first question that came to my mind was, why are we looking at taking anything from District 4? Because it's the one that needs the most added to it. Now, District 4 is 3,600 people down. And I can't remember what District 1 is, but District 4 is by far the one that needs the most people. And just the fact that we were talking about taking anything out of District 4, I really couldn't grasp, and really kind of still don't, but but it's Mike's fault.
It's my fault.
Yeah.
That area, just like the area called Alexander, is a way to work with population in District 1, which needed people that had little effect on the minority profile. And as you go along common borders with other districts, that's not the same. So I picked the area that's down by the river. Kelly was looking and knew that area and identified that other area that I call Alexander. But if you get beyond that particular area of common border that those both fall in, you end up in areas where you lose the ability to match population and not have a more significant effect on the minority profile.
The voting power would be diluted.
It would, and if you go over the other way, then you're robbing from District 1. So,
Doing the same thing.
yeah, I mean, from District 2, excuse me. Yeah. So that's all. And like I said, it was never meant to be a flag to die for. It was just a way to get the discussion started.
Do you think that the council understood that? I mean, I don't think anybody on the council has been through a redistricting process before, except Alice now, but you know.
It was in every piece of writing I gave them and every presentation I made. I think they're all bright people. I think they understood that.
Tony, could you clarify something? I'm looking at both proposals in
At
the
the what?
spreadsheet. And on both those, it looks like District 4 is the second most populous district.
Only after the shift is made. Right now, just the current census,
No,
it needs 3,600 more people.
Pat, we moved in whole election precincts from 3 and 5 to
Right.
add to 4's population.
But the
Okay.
current,
So even with, once you make that change, whether we take either one of these out, it'll be the second most populous district.
Yeah.
Okay.
which gives 3 and 5 a little more room to grow again, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
or
3,
especially 3.
well, yeah, I mean, 5 for the longest time and now 3 going out between Woodway and Hewitt, just out that way. You know, there's one annexation at the end of 3 that doesn't show up in the census, has about 1,500 people in it. So.
All right.
So,
Any-
so after the changes, which district will have the least population?
It'd probably still be, I'd have to go look, Linda, it may still be District 2. Be my guess. Huh?
2 or 1?
Well, it depends on what changes we make because there have been other changes suggested or at least asked about. So,
If Alexander is in District 1, then 1 and 3 are very close, 27,295 versus 27,335.
yeah,
Right.
If Alexander's in District 4, then 1 has 27,227 and 3 has 27,335.
and see, one's currently at 666 people low in one of these, well, actually in both of these, or 734. And then, yeah.
I may be creating a distraction, and if I am, I apologize. But I don't know what I am supposed to be considering in order to consider whether the one sheet proposal should even be a viable option for this committee. Professor Morrison, shall we devote any of our time and attention to this concern about the growth corridor around Highway 84 in China Spring, or is that a matter for another day?
I guess that's up for the committee to decide, just as someone who, I'll answer your question as best I can. As someone who's been on the council, like Tony has, based on the council discussion so far, I really don't sense any appetite to start over and to plan for the future as opposed, you know, because one of the devices that's been historically used to impair minority voting is to change districts around. So that.
Did you say in impairing minority vote?
Yeah, that's one of the devices used to interfere with minority voting strength is to break up communities of interest. And right now you've got 5 council districts that have been, even since Tony and my time, have been fairly steady, except for the growth of 3 and 5 pushing out. And I can't tell from this map how much difference it would make, but As you go out towards China Spring and as you try to go out Highway 84, it's a spider web. There's no portion of the districts that won't be affected by a fairly fuzzy map. And my best guess is that you'll find the council has little appetite for this sort of an approach.
Yeah, maybe a statement in our recommendation that some interesting things, some interesting ideas came to us that we felt time constraints wouldn't let us even really deal with those adequately, but that the council might want to start now, or at least soon, thinking about growth potential and how that would affect the council districts and vice versa. And there was something else. There's another issue, and I'll tell you when my mind comes back, but just make a statement like that. Maybe you want to start thinking about some of these things,
It's up to the group.
Well, and I think just kind of in the context of the entire redistricting process, I mean, the fact that as far as agreement and consideration of the council and kind of negotiation, for lack of a better term, and honoring the neighborhood association and the cohesiveness of the existing districts, for us to get down to this part is really an accomplishment. So yes, we're working through this, and I think hearing from both councilwomen will be helpful and with the additional information. But I think really in the whole scheme of things, the process has gone, to a point where we can make a decision. And I think that's, something to be commended, because obviously this is not something that happens but every 10 years typically. And it's definitely not an easy discussion, and there's lots of emotions and history behind the scenes that we're all trying to, just kind of process. So.
And I guess, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I think they'd rather hear from you.
No, we'd rather hear from you.
Well, so caveat, I'm new in town. I don't know what I don't know. But I just want to say that if any of you are considering this proposal, as I read it and lobby a few questions to our city attorney, it doesn't seem to me that what it appears to be suggesting is what it's actually suggesting. And what I mean by that is if I look at the growth and around Highway 84 in China Spring, and I look at some of the statements being made about diluting voting strength, and we know that we have some constitutional issues if we go too far and dilute minority voting strength. I can't see how we should spend a whole lot of time on this because it may impair voting strength. And I don't think that's what we're setting out to do here. But I'm new and I don't quite know if that's accurate.
You're right.
Really can't tell. Whoever wrote it says it doesn't, but can't tell. I'm sorry.
I couldn't hear you.
I didn't worth hearing. I said, you really can't tell from the map, but whoever developed it has said it doesn't impair voting strength. So I take it for granted. One thing I was going to mention is entirely up to the committee, but in the past, there's always been the opportunity for a minority report to the council, and I think they appreciate that. If it turns out there are people who find themselves other than in agreement with the committee's recommendation, if I was on the council, I would want to hear that ahead of time before the presentation.
Absolutely. And I know, just in my discussions with Dylan originally, he even asked for that, whereas, if this was what was, if a specific plan was determined to be presented, yes, but then if there were points, and I think, whether it's, something from this particular map or just for future consideration or minority interest, minority points, I think they are definitely interested in that. And even if that just spurs additional ideas, because obviously this is our, presentation to them, but obviously it will come to a vote. So. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair and committee, I wanted to get you information. I know since you do have a quick timeline and I have this available for the Alexander area, this is just specifically voter numbers, statistics for that area. Still waiting on Jared to send me the precinct 10 numbers, but there are 888 registered voters in that area. About 1% vote during a May election. This goes back again to 2016. The most voters that voted during a May election for that area were 7. 35% voted in a November 2020 election. So you had 315 voters voted in November of 2020, 191 for 2018, and 187 voters in 2016. So that's those are the voters in just precinct 39. And as soon as I get the precinct 10 numbers, and again, just for the areas that are currently mapped out, I think that might give you some insight into the involvement, I think, in those different precincts. Which number, what?
Unless you just want the whole.
Could you do all of them?
All of
again?
them?
I can do it all again. And I will email it to you. I just wanted to get it to you as soon as possible. I know you want this information so that you can make a quick. And
Again, for Alexander.
this is just for Alexander, precinct 39 voters. Just for that area that's outlined, 888 registered voters. The most voters that ever voted in a May election back to 2016 are 7 voters. 315 voters voted in a 2020 November election. In the November 2018 election, there were 191 voters from that area. And for the November 2016 election, there were 187 voters.
Esmeralda.
And that
did
would
you-
have been a mayoral election. If it's an even number year, it's a
It's a
mayoral
mayoral.
election. If it's an odd number year, huh?
But
Oh,
not in
well,
November.
no, the November one, the 2021 was just an odd year. I mean, we had,
She's been saying November.
For May of 2021 election, that's where the 7 voters had. That was
That
the
was the
most
mayoral.
voters we had. And that's the most. So for other elections with a May election, they were less than that.
right.
The most voters in that time period.
And some of those areas, even when there was a presidential election and people were at the polls, they chose not to vote in the city election.
Well, the November 2020, which would have
Right.
included all of those elections that we
Right.
talked about, including special election for District 4, there were 315 voters who voted from that precinct, but we do not know if they voted for a District 4 position or a city position. As soon as
Well,
I get those other
on
numbers,
that-
I'll send
On
it to
what I gave Jennifer, it gives the number of undervotes.
you. Yeah.
So
it
it'll tell you
does.
who,
Yeah, it
it
does.
tells you the number of ballots cast and the number of people
That
who
get
didn't vote,
cast for that one.
called undervotes.
Mhm. So I'm hoping that that'll give you some insight into that particular area, and then I will, as soon as I get the other numbers, it may not,
So are you waiting on, I'm sorry, because
I'm waiting on precinct 10
10. And
for
do
the
you want
river
precinct
area.
1, 2, or
Huh?
just,
I'm sorry, what was that question?
are there 2 precincts in the river area?
I think it was just
One.
one,
Just one.
all
just
of 10,
Precinct
or
10, okay.
yeah, 10 mostly makes up that.
Oh, it's. split.
Precinct 10, for some, I guess this was like when God created earth, he also created the precinct numbers. I don't know who developed those. They've been the same since I've been working with them.
My
Um,
understanding
and-
is they
And so
work,
you don't have that same kind of evening out of population or anything like that. So precinct 10 that we're looking at is much larger in size than most precincts and a lot larger in population and a lot larger in registered voters. So it's not odd that a lot of votes come from that precinct. I'm not sure that it indicates that it's a more active voting area, but there are just a whole bunch more people in it. I mean, it is a little more active than obviously the one that you just read us, but
but I will get those statistics to you as soon as I get this.
that is the challenge of running for a local position. It's just getting people to even know. And I think after this process, everybody sitting around this table is going to be qualified to serve on the city council. So think it over. You will have thought more deeply about this than just about anybody else in town ever. Right.
All right, so Esmeralda will give us that information for our river area / precinct 10. And we'll go ahead and send Alexander out just so everybody kind of has it in a good format. And I will reach out to Councilwoman Palmer and Councilwoman Fairfield for their statements. And then as soon as we get that information, we'll disseminate that to the group. I would much rather have that to you prior to the next meeting, so you can make some considerations before we meet. And if there's anything else, as you're getting information and you need something, please filter your requests through me and I will get with Jennifer or Esmeralda or Professor Morrison as the case may be.
We have 2 weeks, so there's
Yes.
time to.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, it is a tight time frame, but we've got a great group and we can conquer as we spread out our thoughts. All right. Any further discussion, requests? All right. Then we will adjourn this meeting as of, let's see what time it is. 5:34 p.m. Thank you all very much for being here today. I appreciate it.